How you doing? How you doing, Angela?
I'm doing really well, Roger. How are you? I've had a nice kind of rest over Christmas with the family. It was very quiet, obviously, as it is for many people being in tier four. But we spent some family time together, and I think we were just grateful that we could spend it together, right? There's a lot of people who were on their own. What about yourself?
You know what? That's a valid point because leading up to Christmas, I'd spoken to my mum and I was saying to her, can't wait to have you over because she's never at my house. We talk over the phone. And, you know, I think about maybe a week before Christmas, obviously this whole tier four kicked in. And I was like, really? Like, really? But my mum's okay about it, but I wasn't too keen about it. However, Christmas was cool. It was
Hmm.
just another year, really. I think for me, if I'm gonna celebrate Christmas, I try to keep it to the traditional sense of what is Christmas about. A lot of people say it's about giving and receiving and family time. Well, kind of, but I think it's actually about Jesus's birthday. So for me, I'm like, if I'm going to celebrate Christmas, let's keep it real. So I went to the church. I don't normally go to the church, but I thought if I'm going to celebrate it, let's go to the church. Went that and done a few, Christmassy things. Read a few passages from the Bible, done a few prayers and that sort of thing. So it was cool.
That's nice. That's so nice, isn't it? I'm the same as you. We don't go to church that regularly, but we do always go at Christmas. And I think, because as you say, it is about Jesus's birthday, and I really like the children to understand that in particular, that it isn't just about Santa Claus and presents and things.
Well, isn't at all, but
Exactly. And so really understanding why Christmas is there, I think is important. So we've done some of that as well. And just spending that quality time as a family, I think is so important. We had a weird one actually, because we had a scenario where we'd barely seen my parents all year because they both have underlying health conditions, so they were vulnerable. So we'd kind of seen them out in the garden in summertime, but really kept our distance to protect them from COVID. And then we had this crazy situation where my dad in October, he's on full-time dialysis,
right.
basically got an infection and was taken into hospital. And then while he was there, he contracted COVID within 5 days of arriving because it's so prevalent in the hospital. So at first we were just so nervous, what's going to happen here? We've been trying to protect him all this time. And he was mostly asymptomatic. I mean, he had symptoms and he was given steroid treatment, but fortunately came through. And then he was discharged COVID positive 6 weeks later, because apparently in the elderly, they can stay positive for a long time. And then he came home to my mum, who was also vulnerable,
Mm.
and COVID positive. So they had this crazy scenario where they were having to self-isolate from each other within the same house. And instead of us not seeing them at Christmas, this is pre-tier four, instead of us not saying, well, we can't see them because we want to protect them, this was a crazy situation where they had COVID in the house and they didn't want to give it to our kids, which is ironic, really. But thankfully, he's now COVID negative. And so far, my mum seems so good. But
Mm.
yeah, it's just crazy turn of events. And I think so many people this year have had really, really challenging years. I know we were chatting just before the show about, how we can kind of control our mindset and things, because it has been a year of rapid change, hasn't it? And also
Mm.
surprises, right? I mean, I was shopping for Christmas presents in a little kind of comic shop. My kids love those bobbleheads. I don't know if you've seen those from the Star Wars movie.
Yeah, yeah.
They're like, my 11-year-old is collecting them. And there I was in
Okay.
this tiny little shop, we're all masked up getting Christmas presents. And then the government makes the announcement that today, that's it. On that same day, they're just going to close everything. And I really felt for, these small retailers, because we
Mm.
just we've never lived in that environment before, have we? Where, a freedom can be taken away from you in an instant.
I know, and it makes you truly appreciate that. Yeah, you so freely doing everything as normal without thinking that at some point that freedom can be taken away. You'd think about it being a thing of like past. When we're talking about things like oh gosh, oh, I can't even think now. But activists trying to get rights and stuff like that.
Mm.
You do have different type of activists speaking now, And it's a real bizarre situation. Like, you find yourself getting caught up in trying to dissect what is going on.
Mm.
And it's like a whole nother pandemic altogether. Like, when you start deep diving in areas where you just thought, oh, what's this? Oh, maybe an image was floating around, a meme or a video, and I don't know, you start to question a lot of things, and you think, all right, I don't know how I feel about this, but yeah, that's an entire different subject. But I think what we have at the moment is there's so many people that are stressed. People are
Mm.
staying home, people are stressed. um Whether it's like lack of movement, exercise, or just spending too much time watching the news, or it's I get a lot of questions from people on social media asking me how I deal with stress. But the thing is, I don't really stress at all. I have moments where I might, I don't know, feel a bit agitated, but I feel as though I've been practicing just like self-healing and recognition, like always taking self-inventory to make sure that I'm in a good state of mind. I've been doing it for so long that it's almost like I don't know how would I deal with stress, because it doesn't really
How
hit me that
how
way.
does that look for you then, in terms of like when you say taking self inventory? How does that work out for you? Like, are there practices that you do in the morning, or do you set aside a certain time, or do you just take stock of how you're feeling? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, I have, certain practices in the morning religiously, with breathing exercises, relaxation, even doing visualization. I've got like a gratitude list. I think we might have spoken about that before. But these sort of things are pretty standard for me. There are moments where I feel as though like my screen time might be a bit much. I could be on the laptop and I'm working, and then all of a sudden I feel like my head just doesn't feel quite right. It feels a bit cloudy, or I might feel a slight headache. And I'm like, oh, wow, I've been on the laptop for hours. That's it. I'm up. I need to move away.
Mm.
That to me is self-inventory. If equilibrium is broken somewhere, that to me is self-inventory. And I'm like, all right, what have I been doing that has caused me to feel in this state? Sometimes I might have eaten something and I'm like, I know what's gone on there. I've eaten something which is might have some mycotoxins in there, or I've eaten like way too much carbohydrates, high glycemic or something like that. That tends to happen with me. Like if I eat biscuits, crisps, chocolate, pizza, anything kind of man-made.
Mm. It's
Um,
dead energy, isn't it? But it's worse than that, I find, those foods, because they're not, and obviously we all have them, right? And I'm not in any way trying to be perfect,
mm,
but they're not just kind of like not alive. They actually, I find, deplete your body to process them. So it's worse than them not being. I think people often think that if they have a bowl of chips or something, they know that there's no nutritional quantity to it. I think what they underestimate is then actually what it's taking from your body. I was reading an article that talked about when you eat chips that have been, deep fried in vegetable oil, that your inflammation in the body will rise for 24 hours afterwards. And I
yeah.
think that, you get brain fog, you feel certain muscle ache, you don't feel good. That's the thing, isn't it?
Mm,
Um,
mm. And you have to start, yeah, you have to take more vitamins to try and bring you back up to just a normal state. For me, it's so difficult now where if I eat certain kryptonite foods, I take a few days to recover. I
mm,
remember when I was younger, when I was like 18 years old and I used to go clubbing, I would I would go out clubbing and arrive home at maybe 5 in the morning. And I remember I was working at McDonald's then. And I would take Pro Plus, and then I would go to work at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be fine. I would be fine. I'd start flagging after a few hours, and I'll take a bit more Pro Plus and eat a bit of food. And I was all right. I could cruise. I'll be all right. And I'll be like, I just need some good sleep tonight. And there was a few weekends where I'd go out back to back. Whereas now I don't even think about going out. That is out of the question. If someone says, hey, do you want to go out? I'm like, no, I am not interested. When people talk about drinking, I stopped drinking anyway. I have no interest in that.
Did you stop drinking entirely? Because I find going out, I totally agree with you. And for me, there's a very, very minimal amount of alcohol that I think I can have without it affecting me. I wouldn't say I'm teetotal, probably because my husband and I have always passionately kind of collected wine, stored it, bought it on Premier, visited vineyards. There's a whole romantic thing associated with it. But I'm definitely very much like, I know that if I have more than 2 drinks, I'm going to be affected, which sounds crazy because it's like, well, I think you just have to enjoy wine to do it for that purpose, because you're never going to get any effects from the alcohol in terms of, when people go out, they're looking for an effect, aren't they? They're looking to get, which you're not going to get from that minimal amount. However, anything more than that, I'm the same as you. I just think it moves me off set point. So it's, and then I notice it the next day.
I've just decided I'm not going to drink at all, because it doesn't really affect me that much. And I remember doing a genetics test which said that you're actually okay with alcohol. You're a great metabolizer for alcohol. And it said, but caffeine, you're not. I was like, no, I want it the other way around.
I want it the other way. Give me as much coffee as I can handle.
Yeah, because I was like, alcohol, I don't really care. And that's the thing. And I think that was the issue. Because I could drink alcohol, it never really affected me. I could drink more and more and more. And I just didn't want to drink so much alcohol. And I just thought, because I wasn't drinking it so often, when I go out with mates, I said, well, okay, this is a moment where I could drink it. And then I'll just get wasted. Be drinking, not feeling it. And all of a sudden, it will hit me. And when I start thinking about how much I've consumed, I'm like, why did I do that? Just to keep up with people. And I just thought, you know what? No, if I write it off completely, if somebody says, oh, do you want to drink? And I tell them I don't drink, there's no thing of like, oh, I'm not drinking today. Because the moment you say that, that's a window.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I'm saying? They're like, oh, you do drink. Well, in that case, you can have a little. I'll have some more. But the moment you say you don't drink, there's no challenge. There's no challenge at all.
No, that's true. As soon as you remove the decision completely, then actually it's way, way simpler, isn't it? It's like whenever I go through periods where I'm like, right, I'm not going to drink for 2 months or something at all, just because I want to, have a break from any alcohol. And it's just so simple, because it's not like, will I have a glass of wine or won't I? There's actually no decision to be made. It's like, well, no, because I'm not drinking. So I completely agree with that. It's a bit like when you look at your genetics and your chronotype. I think the hardest thing for me is and I've done questionnaires to kind of confirm it as well. I'm very much an early morning person. And so going out is just... We sound like really boring people here, don't we? But going out for me is, I'm that person when people come over for a dinner party, I'm like, do you need me to book you a cab? Because I want them to go, and like, I can't do the 2-3 a.m s. Do you know what I mean? I'm very much like 10 o'clock is kind of my limit. And because I wake up early, and I think it's really, really difficult. I think if you're kind of a mixed chronotype, not Dr. Bruce talks about this, America's Sleep Doctor, the kind of bears that are the 50% of the population, and they're your classic kind of 11 till 7 people. I think it's much easier, because if you want to stay up late, you can do it. If you've got an early morning flight to catch, you can do it. You can kind of sort of go both ways. Whereas if you're either a night owl or an early morning, I think it's really difficult to shift. And I certainly find that. So I'd rather see friends for lunch and have them all go home by 7 o'clock than party. But I was always that person at a party, even with the loud music, I'd be asleep on the sofa, regardless of what was going on around me. So no one's ever going to invite me out now, are they? Just announced it. You heard it on the Roger Snipes show.
What's your thoughts on nootropics? I don't know if we spoke about nootropics before, but there's so many different kinds out there, and I've always tried to figure out what are the best ones. And I was speaking to, I've got his name now, Bioptimizers dude.
Oh yeah, Wade,
yeah. And
yes.
he was telling me about the new nootropic stack which they have there. And I don't know whether you've seen some of the posts by Wade or by Optimizers, but it looks incredible. It's it's a like personalized stack for individuals. I'm like, oh, really? That sounds to me like what I need, you know, because I've tried so many different types and
they don't.
I'm
Do you know
impressed.
the biggest thing? I don't know if you found this, and I interviewed Wade actually not long ago, and I love their products. I just think they're awesome. But I found with nootropics is the attenuation is just too quick with most of them. So like I'll take something and I'll be like, right, great, this is amazing. Now I've got focus work. And then you take it for 4 or 5 days and then it's like, what is it? Even like 2 weeks maybe. And then it's like, this isn't really working for me anymore. Whereas I think that I haven't tried their nootropics that they've recently launched. I have tried their Capex, which I don't know if you ever take that, but that surprisingly gives you really clean burning energy and helps upregulate fat burning. But it also has specific things that move energy into mitochondria. And I find that actually, like in a fasted state when I'm working with black coffee, is just kind of magic in terms of focus. The thing I've got on my list, so, and I'm really keen to hear yours, is I've kind of been writing down what am I gonna do in the new year that I'm really gonna track and see how it affects me. And I recently interviewed Neil Tenier, who founded Wild Kingdom, and this is a mushroom company. And he's just sent me a whole load, in fact, their range of mushrooms. And so I'm going to experiment with them individually. So like physically really test lion's mane and see how those tinctures affect my mental cognition. Because obviously, like, I can't remember if you said you had it as well, but I know I have one copy of the APOE4, the Alzheimer's gene. So you've got it as well. So I'm really interested in the research behind the studies that they're doing. I think at the moment it's just on mice, but between lion's mane and protecting against things like Alzheimer's, but also the fact that it enhances things like BDNF and it can really enhance REM sleep, which normally my sleep's pretty good, but I'd say if I lose out, I am variable. So sometimes my REM sleep drops, sometimes my deep sleep drops. So that's something that I really want to play with them individually and actually track and see what's going on. I'm doing quite an interesting experiment at the moment where I'm comparing Aura against Whoop. So
right, okay.
That's quite, I recently got it. So it's only been on, it's literally only just calibrating. I literally got it a few days ago. But I was really, I'd had a lot of clients who refused, they basically don't want to wear jewelry. So the next best thing, and I don't like the fact that it is constantly assessing me. Do you know what I mean? There's a light on. I don't like that. But I was really keen to see, because it assesses things like strain alongside HRV. I was really keen to sort of have a look at that data and as I'm measuring these things, to actually see how it compares. So that's quite an interesting thing I'm doing at the moment.
Awesome. When did you get that? Just a few days
ago? I got that just a few days ago. Yeah, it came just before Christmas. So it takes about 4 days to kind of calibrate your recovery baseline. What I've noticed at the moment is it isn't assessing, when it looks at strain, it's only really looking at cardiovascular strain. So if you go and do a weight training workout, then it isn't really recording that as strain. Does that make sense? So I could go and do a really heavy weight session, which I know is obviously stressing the body, but Whoop doesn't seem to be picking that up. And I know that it looks more, whereas if I go for a run, for example, then it will assess my strain as that much higher. So it's definitely looking at heart rate, I think, as a metric more than anything else. But it's quite interesting comparing some of the sleep data and the recovery. Okay.
I've been spending a little less time with the whole wearable thing. I mean, I do have an Aura ring, but I haven't actually charged it up for a long time. And even with my Apple Watch, I'll wear it sometimes. I'm just trying to keep things as natural as possible without really focusing too much on that. Because I found my head just constantly checking data every second. And I'm like, is this what is mounting up some of my screen time? You know, always checking. Oh, how am I now? You know, and I'm thinking, all right, how am I feeling about this? This is the other part of self-inventory. And I'm like, does it really matter? Kind of, but no, not really. I done okay without it. I kind of wanted to know that information, but it's more of a want than a need. So I guess, yeah, I'm just trying to incorporate stuff which I feel is important for me without trying to track too much on how accurate is it. I guess that's me, because you know, I'm very much into health and fitness, and I think for me, I might get a bit too involved without and making it kind of take over me if I'm not careful. So
yeah, it's a bit like you can kind of become a bit sort of orthorexic, can't you? You can become obsessed with healthy eating, obsessed with tracking. I think you're right. I think when I take breaks, that's always welcome as well. I was on holiday in Croatia in August, and it was quite interesting because I slipped by the pool. It's probably a really dumb thing to do, to actually do a workout next to the pool. Because there's obviously a high risk of injury. And I did. And I think one of my kids did a huge dive bomb just as I was about to do a lunge, which flooded the area. And I literally went flying, but bashed my eye. It was like all bleeding from the top of my eye. And I had quite a bad, well, not bad because I didn't have to go to hospital, but a mild concussion.
wow.
And that my Aura ring actually ran out while I was on holiday. And in a way, it would have been nice to see the metrics, but in another way, it was really relaxing actually not to look at the data. But the first night, everything was before it ran out, everything after that head injury was all over the place. It was kind of, I was having a lot more rapid eye movement sleep. No, sorry, not rapid eye movement, a lot more deep sleep. Like the deep sleep just went up exponentially, which I guess was the recovery from the injury.
Wow.
And I had this monster headache for about 3 days. But my Aura basically failed on me and I hadn't brought the charger. So I have no data of tracking a head injury with Aura. But I remember thinking how relaxing it was actually to not be monitoring things and just have some time away and just intuitively think about how do I feel. I think, as you say, how do I feel is such an important thing. I like to bring attention mindfully actually to kind of any situation. I don't know about you, but I find this, I think I read it from Brendan Burchard originally, you know, who wrote, Brendan Burchard, he wrote High Performance Habits. And he talks about having alarms on your phone and almost as you go through a doorway, deciding like who you want to be. And I find it really useful. So you kind of, it makes you focus on whichever area you're working in 100%. So for example, like, and you can use labels to make you achieve this. So for example, like when I'm with my clients or I'm on coaching calls or with my programs, then I will have, you know, and sometimes I go through phases where I'll set it as a physical alarm on the phone. So it'll be like, you just think, right, world's greatest coach. How can I be the best coach I can possibly be and show up for those people in the best way? And then, you know, once you finish work, it's so easy, isn't it, to transition, particularly with the lockdowns we've been having and everyone working from home, to be sort of half at work, half with the family. So I've then reinstated this practice where it's like, well, who am I now, right? Now I am world's greatest mother and wife. And then you just, and it's not, I'm nowhere near, of course,
No,
but it just means that I can be mindfully in that moment with them and just think, well, and it kind of guides you because it's like, well, you don't kind of lose it as easily. You don't, you're not distracted with the kids, which I think is a really common thing. Cause it's like, well, how would the world's greatest mother show up right now? What would she be doing? Do you know what I mean? Would she be like baking cookies or listening to their days? Of course she would. She wouldn't be distracted and going, I'll be with you in a minute. I'll be with you in a minute on her phone, you know?
That's
So
interesting. What I think, you see your workspace, is there one particular part where you work in your house, or do you tend to cruise around and work in different?
So I do cruise around a bit because I get bored. I do have my home office, but where I am at the moment, but I will go and sometimes work at the kitchen table, like particularly if I'm reviewing, you know, quite a few bits for a client, like, you know, blood work and DNA and things like that. Then I might have everything out in front of me and I'll spread out. But I generally I never ever take work into my bedroom ever, because I just think that for me is, you know, there's only two things, isn't there? Sleep and sex in the bedroom. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that kind of messes with your relaxation, I think.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I don't know where I read it, but you know, if there is a workspace, to just try and keep it there. And, you know, otherwise other areas can end up being taken over by your work. You know, it starts off just like, you know, just sitting there with your laptop, not really thinking about it. And you could be speaking to your kids, just working slightly. And then, yeah, it's one of those where you're not fully engaged in either one properly. And now this has become your work area. It's not really your area of relaxation. So for me, I just try to keep the laptop in one particular area. And the moment I'm leaving, although the purpose of the laptop is that you can move it around, it's like I'm kind of conscious where it is, and I'm like, no, you're staying there. You're not moving around with me. It's kind of
Mm.
interesting. I remember even there was I think it was an audio book talking about people who have these drug habits, and when they go into those alcohol anonymous things, or you know, you know, the detox places, it's a completely new environment from where they're used to taking the drugs. But the problem is when they go back to their home where they normally go, where they normally have it, it's everything is all wired to the space where they would take it, and they end up just kind of relapsing. And it's about them kind of rearranging their home and kind of changing the way things are. I can't remember the whole depth of it, but
Mm.
it's kind of interesting how you associate certain areas of the house with certain things.
Yeah, and I think for people who, I agree with that. I think people who, you know, maybe they live in a smaller property and this has just been kind of, you know, thrust on them that they're now working from home. As you say, if you can even just have like a small desk that is just, that is the workspace, so that you can separate it. Because, you know, there's so much out there at the moment, isn't there, in terms of the prospect of burnout for so many people at the moment, because they're working harder than ever. They don't have a commute anymore. So often their exercise is naturally limited because they're not even walking around quite as much.
Mm.
And they're working all of the time. And I think people's mental health is struggling as a result of that. And I think even just creating that space, as you say, I was having that conversation with Ben Greenfield actually a week or so ago. We had like a mastermind call before Christmas, and I was talking to him specifically on that topic, like how do you distinguish between the work time and the family time so that it doesn't encroach at all in this environment. And he will always keep it in his office. So if he had something to finish off, so I was saying, like, what do you do about the loose ends? Because that's where you want to be present with your children. You don't want to be tying up loose ends at the same time, which I think is the easiest thing you can end up doing.
Mm.
And he would then stop work, go and be with the family. And then it might be like, right, I've just got another 20 minutes. I just need to disappear off, tie up those loose ends, and then come back. And just creating that physical space. And it actually makes, there's a book I think I'm going to go back and reread because it's a brilliant book. Have you read Deep Work by Carl Newport? And he talks about how to enhance creativity and productivity. It's a brilliant book, and how much more focused you are by
What's the name?
setting aside. Deep Work
Okay.
by Cal Newport, I think it is, from memory. Really, really good book.
All right, sweet, noted.
So that's yeah, that's a good one that I found helpful.
So that crosses what, like two different types of work? What is it, like mental?
Yeah, so it helps you to understand, like, well, how to apportion your day. So when are you most creative? When are you most productive? And how can you really bring that productivity and focus and get into that deep work state? Because you accomplish so much more when you are there. Whereas as soon as you're trying to do any kind of multitasking, you're slowing down. It's like open tabs on your browser, isn't it? It's slowing down your computer. And
Mm.
that's happening as soon as you're thinking about, so it's and how you can set aside specific times, because I found this with email. Ended up becoming like, so I used to check email all the time, then I was like, right, there's only specific times to check it, and then you can kind of clear the inbox. It's much more efficient. And I think people feel like, because there's messages everywhere, and you must be the same. Like, I find I get messages in my DMs on social media, then I get messages on WhatsApp, I get messages in Facebook groups that I run, and then I get messages on my membership site with people commenting, and you can kind of almost become, and then emails become overwhelmed because there's so many sources of messages. So I now just set aside specific times where it's like, right, this is, and it generally will be later in the day, because I don't like to use that most productive time that I have in the morning, where I have most of my creative thoughts, by doing what is basically task-based.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And notifications, like cutting those off as well. That's really important. Like if you get lots of emails, sometimes I get a ton of emails, but I get a lot more DMs than emails, and I can't respond to them all at once. And I do have someone who's working on some of that as well, because it can, yeah, it just eats up part of your day. One thing I wanted to ask you though is, how do you deal with, all right, so there's times when I don't necessarily want to do stuff, but I do it anyway, and I manage to get through it. Physically, I can deal with it quite easily. And I remember when I was working in a warehouse and everything was like a physical labor job, I was getting exhausted, but it was not until I worked in an office and then was getting mentally exhausted, I was like, damn, put me back in the warehouse. That was easy. Now, me going outside and jogging or cycling in the cold when I really do not want to do it is not a problem for me. I can do it. But the moment I need to get some work done and my brain is like, I'm really not in the mood to do this, it's so tough. I don't know how to get around it. But there's so many times I push myself as much as I can to get some work done. Like, I don't know, I could be just working on a new campaign, or a new project has come my way and I need to go through it. And sometimes I'm like, my brain just wants to do something exciting. Like, this is not fun. And it's a struggle. And it's less easier for me to do that than me going out and freaking jogging in the cold or something. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, that's that. So I find there's two things there, because that is hard. If it's task based, then you can push yourself in the same way you can with a workout, right? It's almost accepting, I'm not going to enjoy it, but there is a reward of finishing at the end, right? So but I find that the hardest thing. Like, so tax returns, okay, that is so dull. And I mentioned them because I have like VAT stuff to do this week, send to my accountant. That is so dull, right? It's so boring that there's nothing creative for me. And that is a case of, like, I think what you're talking about there, when you go and do something that you don't like but is a physical thing, it's not requiring so much brain power, is this is another really amazing book. I think it's called Turning Pro by Stephen Pressfield. This is an amazing book, and it's such a quick read. So for anyone that is like not in your scenario that's listening, who actually can't motivate themselves to go and do the run or go and do the workout or anything that they have to do, he talks about the difference between the day that your life changes the day you decide to turn pro. So it's like, what would a pro do? They would go and do it anyway, right? They would never. An amateur basically says, I'll only do it when I feel like it, or I'm looking for the motivation, because motivation comes from action. People think it's the other way around, that they need the motivation to take action and then they get the result. Whereas actually starting to set in movement, like going up that run, if you start going, you start jogging, chances are you're going to keep going with it and the motivation starts to come. So with a task-based thing, there is an element of pushing, but that's different, I find. And I find with clients when it's creative, because if it's creative, I find that your brain needs to be in a certain space, and it can be extremely frustrating, particularly like you were saying there, when you've got a new project and you're trying to bring some kind of artistic angle to it, that you really want to create something amazing, but you're not in a state of flow. And I think that is then starting to understand the need for breaks, because you never ever can have unlimited creative brain power, if you like. You've probably only got maybe, I reckon a maximum of 4 hours, but probably 1.5 to 2 really good hours in your day. And so if you've then already done things that have depleted that resource before you begin it, it's going to be very difficult. So you almost then need to think the other way and say, well, I'm going to go and take a break until I have got some degree of inspiration back. And it might be that then going for that cold jog is actually what's going to feed that creativity to come back and be fired up to do it. But I think there's mental preparation, because anything that's mentally involved is much more difficult particularly when it involves something creative. And I think people will often lose their creativity through just continually pushing themselves. So they just keep pushing one project to the next and stacking them, and then never having recovery. Whereas they'll go away for a week and then suddenly all this creative thoughts come to them and they feel so inspired and refreshed. And I think you absolutely have to recharge to continue to bring that creativity.
Do you ever find, so yeah, many times, definitely. It's like when they say about when you're reading a book, the things that you remember the most is lots of beginnings and endings. So if you take lots of breaks, you get a lot more beginnings and endings, and you actually retain a lot more as well. But what I was going to say was, do you find with some things that you could never be inspired? Like you could never be motivated, never be inspired, but it's something that you need to do. And it might not necessarily be, I think tax returns is probably going to be the most boring thing ever.
It's hard to match that, isn't it?
Yeah, no, yeah, that is kingpin. But certain things, like, it's just like, what's going on? What's going on? Let me do some push-ups. Let me go do a jog. Let me have a coffee. Where's the best nootropic stack? And your brain is like, nope.
Not doing it. Yeah. What things would that be like? I have had that, but I find it's when I've done a period of intense work. Right. So that's what I found. Or I haven't had enough recovery. Does that make sense? So like I had a really, really intense block of period where I was creating this program, a 90-day program, and I did it with the first group live. And for September through December, it's like a longevity program, how to live younger. And it was really intense. And I was giving it all on my content, and it was week after week. And by December, I knew that I needed a rest. And so I found that I'm having to, because I naturally want to do more and more all the time, I'm sort of having to force myself to take a break over this Christmas and New Year period. So today is actually the only day that I'm doing, podcast and calls and things. And then I'm off again until the 4th of January, because I know that I need that complete reboot. And that's where I do think that the tracking comes in, because I'm not very good at admitting to myself that I need to rest. Whereas one thing that Aura does do is show me my HRV. And when that's tanking, for me, that will tank as quickly from overwork as it will from over exercise. I don't know if you found that.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't, in fact, I think the over exercise is probably, you can probably go a little bit overboard on that, depending on your body type. But yeah, if mentally you are depleted for different reasons, it could show quite a lot, I believe. I was going to say something. I've spent a lot of time talking with many professionals about personal development and high performance, not just academically, but like psychological and emotional development. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like kind of like psychological and emotional resilience almost.
Yeah. Like, what would you say is, I don't know, like what professionals really work on to be at their optimal? Like how can a person be the most resilient in those particular areas? Like psychological and emotional, not just in this day and age, but just as a human being, like to be a high performer, with all the different things hitting you from different angles. Yeah, I find that many professionals have lots of, as we was talking earlier, lots of like daily rituals and stuff like that to keep them going through. But what would you say has worked for you over the years to be, very resilient?
Yeah, I guess. So for me, and I'd be interested to see like what you found. For me, I think that the biggest battle for me initially was deciding to be better and the best that I can be rather than perfect. And I think I was always a perfectionist, and that was really, really difficult. And then as a lawyer, when I was practicing as a corporate lawyer, that was drilled in even harder, because if you haven't got something perfectly right, then you could actually be sued. So it's really important that you get that agreement right. Do you know what I mean? So you kind of develop this perfectionism approach. And also when I was at Freshfields, this big law firm in London, we always had this expression of grace under fire. So you always had to maintain your composure, no matter how much the shit was hitting the fan or clients kicking off or anything, it was always grace under fire. And that was kind of their ethos. And in many respects, that made me like very strong. It helped me manage my emotions publicly, but it does put quite an intense pressure on you privately, because you've always got to be hitting that super, super high performance. And I think that can then drive burnout, because we were not sleeping particularly. And then when I had my children and I suffered very badly with postnatal depression, which then became kind of chronic depression, and I was on bipolar medications and things, I then had to really like look back and think, well, how can I get my, I depleted myself so much. I was physically ill as well. It was like, how can I get my brain and body back? And I always think you have to train your mind as much as you train your body. And so but this was the first time that I'd really looked into it. So I'd always been into physical fitness, into nutrition, but now it was kind of like, well, how am I going to get my mind back? And how am I going to get it to do what I want it to do consistently at a high level, when I'm struggling so much that even, getting out of bed and doing the school run has become an achievement. Like, how did I go from, running global mergers and acquisitions to finding it hard to get out of bed? And the first things that I did, because I know we were talking earlier about things like CBT, I did initially go down that road, and I had a lot of psychotherapy and a lot of training. And one thing that has been so helpful for me is to maintain that high performance. I think that you have to be in control of your emotions. And I learned to understand, when you could just be like, you're fine, everything's going well. And then all of a sudden you notice a shift, and you're not quite sure why, but there is now a shift. You feel like unsure of something, or it could be, but it's kind of like a feeling that something's off. Do you ever get that? And you're having to then understand, well, like everything was going really well. Normally that is down to a thought or a thing that happened, but you didn't really register it properly. So I learned to go back and, as part of this CBT, and think, well, what was that? What was the trigger that has now resulted in the way I'm feeling right now? So I started to become more and more like cognizant of what my thoughts were and what they mean, and what they call ants, or automatic negative thoughts that would come in, which everyone has, and how much time I was spending on them. And then understanding, and it took physical work initially, of like having a sheet of paper that I would go through with the therapist of like, what was that automatic negative thought? Do I know this to be true? Do I know it to be absolutely true, beyond all doubt? And how did it make me feel? And then beginning to understand that my emotions were as a result of those thoughts. And then more recently, I've taken this onto a more spiritual level. So I found that going inwards was one of the biggest things that helped me get over depression. So meditation has been a big thing. Gratitude practice, which I know we talked about when we did a podcast together before. And then now I've kind of gone into, well, actually, like, what is, and this might be a bit woo-woo for people. So if they're not into this at all, then they can obviously just, dismiss it if it isn't something that resonates with them. But it's kind of like this concept of, and for some people it will be religion, it will be God. For other people, it will just be the universe. But this concept of source energy. And when you are feeling good, generally you are in alignment with source. So, and that is really in alignment with your inner self and who you really are. And so like learning that self-love instead of self-criticism is so important, I think. And actually saying it's okay. Like, if I mess this up, it's okay. And you actually, that, when we were talking about creativity earlier, that actually unlocks way greater levels of creativity, because there's a degree of freedom that comes. And I've been kind of reading a lot of Esther Hicks' work and watching some of her YouTube videos. And it's interesting because she talks about how your emotions are there to guide you. As soon as you feel a negative emotion, This is like telling you that you're now no longer in touch with your source energy. You're off, something's off, and that's what it's telling you. And so it's kind of like now you've become Joe Dispenza. Have you done any of his meditations? I know I'm jumping around a bit here.
No. I've got his audio book, and I've seen a few of his videos. I think it's somewhere where I want to be, but I'm not there yet.
Not quite there yet. So he talks about it in a slightly different form. So everything's vibration, which he talks about as well. So we are vibration, right? So even the sound, when I'm talking, that is your ear picking up the vibration. And he talks about the fact that when you try to control events and make things happen too much yourself, you're basically becoming more matter than wave. You're more particle than wave. And that's what Esther Hicks talks about in the same way of you're kind of away from source energy now. And that's when you can develop real anxiety over things. And it's particularly relevant, I think, for people at the moment, because there's so many things going on, right? Everybody's afraid of getting this virus. Lots of people are. Everyone is like, so for some people, they're worried about their financial situation. So much has changed. We've got extra pressures. We don't know if we're going to be homeschooling next week. The government's not quite clear on schools yet. And so much is going on. And so you can then start to see control, and anxiety comes in. But when you actually sit in silence and you do something like you were talking earlier, breath work or meditation, gratitude, or just breath work's a really easy entry point. Then you come back to source energy. You realize I'm actually okay exactly as I am. And that starts to guide you, and you start to realize that your emotions are actually an indicator of every single time that you're now out of alignment, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. She then goes way and beyond into the law of attraction, but it's a really useful guide, because I found that when I then align in that way, that does really increase my performance in every aspect, but also that inner sense of calm, and that in turn feeds a lot of creativity, because you're almost more free for those thoughts to come in and actually then provide value back to other people, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really, really interesting. I'll definitely need to check out the books by Esther Hicks, you say?
Yeah, there's a really good book she wrote called Ask and It Is Given, but her YouTube videos, there's someone, and I don't know who the name of it is, but there's somebody who's basically taken her presentations and they've created these YouTube videos of like a cartoon. And so it's like Esther Hicks interviewing somebody, and she puts them in the hot seat. And she does like a little kind of 10-minute almost therapy session on them. They're amazing videos. It's like so well done and so easy for people to watch, and then start to understand and begin to understand that the way that you speak to yourself makes such a dramatic impact on not just your mood, but on your own performance. And people criticize themselves all of the time, like so readily, without even thinking about it. And you'd never, ever in a million years say the things that you say to yourself to a close friend.
That's quite interesting, isn't it? That is really interesting, because people do that all the time. What's your thoughts on like doing ayahuasca and going away on those retreats and stuff like that?
I haven't done it personally, and I think that I was speaking. Do you know Alex Manos?
Nope.
No, he's got a show. He's done a retreat in a medical-based center in Scandinavia. Very, very interesting. I need to remember the name of it. And we recorded a podcast together all about his experience, and he wanted to be somewhere medically based when he did it. I'm really interested in kind of the microdosing of these things. It's not something that I've done yet. I think that I'm sort of trying to be quite gentle with myself, because I'd had such strong medication over the years. I kind of want to access that now in a kind of naked mind state and see where I get to with it. That's not to say that I wouldn't I'm not ruling it out at all. Have you done any yourself?
No, I haven't. Oh, it's weird. Like as you was mentioning about this whole medical thing, and you mentioned also that you have or had bipolar. Is that something you still have?
So I didn't have bipolar, because that is a lifelong condition. I was on bipolar medication because I'd kind of got to the point where I'd had depressive episodes for so long. It was diagnosed as chronic depressive disorder, which people can then apparently tip into bipolar. But the classic kind of antidepressants that people use were not sufficient to basically treat what I had. So that was when I was sort of under the care of the Priory Hospital to a psychiatrist there, and he was prescribing it. And they were very, very strong. They completely knocked me out, and it was like morning and night medication. I'm interested in this concept of psychedelics and how they can actually help people, because it sounds like from the research that's coming out that microdosing with psychedelics can actually be a really, really effective form for treating things like depression. But it's a very new and emerging area. And I guess, I think with things like ayahuasca, I think people need to be around trained professionals, because I think a lot of people are doing it in places where it's maybe not as safe. And I think you can have quite profound experiences. And certainly with some of these psychedelics, you can have what's known as a psychotic break. And I think, and Alex talked all about this on the podcast. And I think that's why he was so keen to do it with medical professionals, because that is very difficult to come back from. And I think people are doing it so readily. Do you know what I mean?
Do you feel that you'd need to be in a healthy psychological state before trying something like that, or do you just need to be with a professional and then you'll be all right?
I think there's a whole routine that they go through in terms of warming you up to it, in terms of the music, the breath work, understanding what your emotions are, and slowly increasing doses. I think that's the thing. Whereas I think a lot of people, they can have this profound experience and it shows something for them that they may not be fully ready for. And that's when it can cause that kind of break.
Right.
So I think that's why I think you need to kind of graduate up very slowly, depending on what's in your past, right? So for some people, and I don't know if you listened, but Tim Ferriss released a podcast about 6 months ago, maybe slightly less, about how when he did plant medicine, it revealed to him some form of childhood interference by a babysitter that he was previously not fully aware of, and he'd kind of buried in his subconscious, I think. So it's really, I think people do need to be careful. I think you need to be around the right people if you're going to do it.
I think it depends on the individual themselves as well, really. Like, it might dig in the past some really nasty stuff, but if you're a strong person, you might be all right with it. Man, I've had some things revealed to me at a later stage and I'm like, wow, really? But if it had been told to me earlier, it probably would have been a struggle for me. No, I'm not saying I'm some sort of Superman or whatever, but I think it just depends on how much you've dealt with as well, possibly in the past, to accept certain things which you didn't know about revealed to you, if that makes sense.
I agree. Because it's kind of like, where are you in terms of your own spiritual development before you do it? But I think because you are under the influence of plant medicine, it's opening up aspects of your brain that you previously hadn't tapped into. You can be shown experiences that are lasting for quite a few hours that you're not able to move away from, if that makes sense.
Wow, right.
So you're then living that in a sort of virtual reality.
I had a friend who'd done some sort of medicine, and it was like she had gone into the past where she was 6 years old. And I think she kind of saw something when she was 6, and it was almost like she was in the body of a 6-year-old. And I found that quite interesting. And she was learning certain experiences from that moment, which is affecting her now. And it made me question, I didn't actually ask her this, but it made me question whether it will be difficult to deal with at that particular time if you were to be 6. Your mind state is you are a 6-year-old. You're not an adult, like seeing yourself in the third party kind of thing of, oh, this was me. Oh, right, I understand. But you're actually...
you're almost going back in time in that experience, and now you're 6 years old again.
Yeah.
That's quite hard.
That would be...
You're not bringing... Yeah, that is quite hard.
Would that be similar with these other plant medicines?
I think that, I mean, well, I don't know if it takes you back so that you're in, because having not done it myself, whether it takes you back to actually being in that childhood state. I think that I do want to read, I think it's Michael Pollan's book. He's written an amazing book on psychedelics because it's something I definitely want to explore more. But I think one of the other things that can happen that I know when I spoke to Alex was hard is, and people underestimate, was the integration back into society in that new enlightened state.
Right.
So part of it is that we're talking there about like source energy and things. Now suddenly you've got more in touch with that and what is the real you, right? Because we're basically vibrational beings having a human experience. So now you've kind of got in touch with that energy. When you come back, he found it quite difficult in terms of integration of like, everybody's worried about things that they don't need to be worried about. Does that make sense?
Right,
And
right.
life and the things that we handle. And so I think, again, that's something that needs help because you feel so enlightened in this state. And a lot of the people around you are not that enlightened. So I think that can be hard as well. But it's a really interesting area because I think having someone who has sort of struggled with their own mind so much, I'm very, very interested in exploring it. But firstly, I guess from more of an investigative kind of research base initially before trying anything on myself. I think I've reached a point where I've got stability in my own mind that I didn't have for, 10 or 12 years, that I would be nervous of doing anything at this point that was going to throw that off. Because it's still a kind of thing that I daily have to work on. And if I don't work on it for a few weeks, I will notice the difference. And then I feel like I've got less control over my mind. And I think that's the thing. Marissa Peer talks about it as being like most people go through life as having this untrained stallion that they're trying to kind of contain and train, and they don't actually have the skills or understand how to do it. I think it's probably a good analogy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was gonna. Oh yeah, no, go on. You ask me, and then I'll ask you. No, go ahead, because this is a slightly off topic. Go on.
It's just about the bipolar thing, because I've known a few people who have bipolar, and I had a client who was bipolar, and she used to turn up. Well, it was an old client when I was doing personal training at Reebok Sports Club, and one day she would turn up, and she was such a joy to train. She was such a lovely person. And then there were other days where she was a complete nightmare. And it got to the point I had to take her aside and I was like, look, I'm sorry. This ain't going to work. I cannot train you anymore. This is insane. Like,
it was like two people almost.
Yeah. Like, I think one time I double booked her. I double booked, two clients at the same slot, and I was going to tell the other client that I'm sorry I've double booked, but she took it upon herself that I was going to tell her to go. But whatever the case may be, maybe I was going to tell her. It could have been that way around where I said, I'm sorry, I can't train you today. But it's just the way she took it and the way she stormed out. That was obviously an accumulation of other times when she was freaking out. And I just thought, this is too much. I'm not getting paid enough for this, man. And then I said, look, I'm really sorry. I will refund you. I can't train you anymore. And then she took me aside later that afternoon. And she said, I really need to talk to you. And she took me aside and she said, I'm really sorry. I've got bipolar. And I just have these moments where emotionally, I feel like I can't control myself. And I feel like I'm in a real dark hole that I can't get out of. It feels, I can't remember the words she used exactly, but it just sounded like a really dark place. And I'm like, wow, like you are two completely like Jekyll and Hyde. It just seems so bizarre to me, but I accepted it and I was like, okay, I didn't know this and it will help me to understand a bit more. And I just wanted to understand, like, because you say you have it, is it like where you feel like you can't control yourself? I mean, now you've got the tools and methods, but let's say before, when you first discovered you had bipolar, were you very very animated about it, or is it something you?
Yeah, so I wasn't diagnosed with bipolar. I was given bipolar medication. I was diagnosed with chronic depressive disorder. So
Right.
it'd gone beyond postnatal, because obviously you can't have postnatal depression for 6 years plus.
Yeah.
It's kind of gone well beyond that. But the medication I was given was a bipolar medication. And what they did find was that I was having, so that experience, so obviously I'm not, anyone listening, I'm not a qualified psychotherapist or anything, I can't give advice, but I was certainly having experiences similar to what you were describing. And that's why they were, the concern was that, and I'll come on to how that felt in just a second, but the concern was that if I stopped the medication, would I now, because the medication basically, it slightly numbs you, right? It's stabilizing that experience. So you're no longer having quite the same highs and lows. It means that you can't experience things as quite as happily as you used to, but you're also not having those lows. There was concern that I would trip into, and apparently the psychiatrist had seen this before, that when people came off that medication, they did then trip into fully bipolar. Now, I did have what we would call, like, bipolar is obviously bipolar experiences. So one is, as you say, she's really, really happy and completely in control. And then other times she feels like this hole. I had those experiences and they were extraordinarily difficult to handle. Like, my heart goes out to anybody that has bipolar, because what would happen for me, and I can only speak for me, is that there would be times where I would feel so on top of the world, like literally so in complete command of absolutely everything. I was like a superhero. So I would be then able to do absolutely everything. So I would wake up in the morning really bright and early. So whereas previously I couldn't get out of bed, I'd be up at 5, I'd be doing workouts, I'd be, like cooking the children muffins or pancakes for breakfast, then I'd be taking them to school. And I was on top of the world, like Superwoman, and working on all these things. And then I would be like, I'd say to my husband, this was such a predictable cycle that we learned to know what it was. But like, I feel on top of the world. I think I'm back. I think I've recovered. I learned over time that that wasn't even me, right? I am not that crazy. I am quite an energetic person, but this was another level. And the hardest part for me is the contrast, or it was for me, it was the contrast, because you would go so high, and what she's describing there, and then so low, and there was no in between. And I would physically feel that something would shift, and I didn't know why, and I had no control over it despite the medication. And so I would go from on top of the world to this slipping feeling, but then I would slip so fast and I would be in this hole. And it doesn't matter, like, you could have the most brilliantly sunny day, there is no lift at all, because for you the darkness within is just so black that you don't want to do anything. And that, that was debilitating, because that's when I would have my son spend an hour and a half yanking my arm, going, mummy, please, we're going to be late for school, mummy, can we get out of bed, mummy? And not even able to physically lift myself. It was like I'd been run over by a train. It's so physical. And so I don't even know how to, my muscles, I don't even know how to get myself out of bed. And knowing then that you've gone from being this amazing parent to going to the complete other extreme is so hard on your family members. And I never wanted to do it. I don't think, I think the biggest criticism I would have, sometimes people from the outside can feel that someone's giving in. I don't think you're giving in. This is like a vacuum. It sucks you in. It's not voluntary. You don't, like, no one wants to go there in that deep, dark hole. And so I'm obviously, like, now I don't have those profound switching experiences. So I definitely don't have bipolar, because I think you have a lifelong experience of that. Right. But I think that I do have to work hard on my mindset on a daily basis to protect it. I protect it. A bit like, with fitness, that if you can get to a degree of muscle mass and body composition, but it doesn't stay if you aren't constantly doing what you need to do, right? You can maintain, but then if it starts to slip a little bit, you've got to up the ante and come back. But there's always, like, some parameters, aren't there, that you kind of feel that within, where your thresholds are until you slip too much. And I think that's the same with the mind. And for me, and I think a lot of people maybe don't think about their mind until there's something that's gone wrong and they've really got to now treat it. And that's how it happened for me. But now I know that I have to train my mind as I train my body every single day.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
Hopefully, I don't know if it helps people, but so I was going to ask you, because moving on from the mind to the body, because this is relevant, I think, for so many people, particularly going into the new year. In terms of body composition, you obviously, you are in incredible shape. I was looking at some of your recent Insta photos, and you are in phenomenal shape. What would you say are the biggest drivers? And I realize it's a little bit different from men and women, but also from working with clients as well. If people who, they might not have a lot of time to spend training, but to really keep that, and they may not be they're going to be the pinnacle at the peak, but to keep a really good body composition and physique and have that health, because muscle is an organ of longevity. What do you find with most of your clients they need to be doing in terms of on a sort of weekly basis, in terms of that split between strength-based training, cardio, things like intermittent fasting and sauna? What would you like if someone's just starting out on that? They're not trying to, they haven't got dramatic weight loss, but they're in an okay shape, but they now actually really want to protect their longevity and take it to the next level. What would you advise to them in terms of the sort of weekly routines and practices they need to have in place?
I guess it just depends what their starting point is, really, like where they're at in life. And because everybody starts with a different body shape. And I guess, you'd have to look and be like, all right, what's going on here? What type of life do they live? Where is their mindset at? And it's kind of like trying to figure out, it's kind of like, what are we working with here? What is the canvas? And then, just tweak it so that they're running in a most optimal state. Like mentally, I think that's where it starts off. So, high nutritious food so that their head is in the right space. And even with work, I like to know what's going on with work. I don't necessarily need to know the details, but I want to know how they're dealing with work. Is it really stressful or is it okay? And if it is stressful, then let's talk about it. Let's try and de-stress. And I think the moment they start to de-stress, that's when their body starts to function a lot better. They tend to get better sleep. With better sleep, their body, their hormones are a lot more balanced. And then we can start looking into diet and the training. So it's almost like, the diet and the training is probably going to come afterwards. But I really want to know what's going on in there, what's going on in their life, if they've got kids, how are the kids, really engaging with them as human beings and not just like, okay, go out and work. I tried that at the beginning. I realized that not everybody is regimented the way I am, where I'll be like that. And then I thought, what are the fundamentals that keeps me there? And I realized that my mind is in the right place. So, I guess, starting off with the mind, always checking in, making sure the mind is in the right place. And then, resistance. It's not even that much science to it, really. Always making sure that if we're going to do resistance training, that it's always something which is going to surprise the body. I just try and keep it exciting for them, really. Just so it's not a typical just progressive overload. Although there's going to be progressive overload, I try to switch it up and make it exciting all the time, because that way, they're always motivated. They're always, it's something new. It's a new plan. It's like, ooh, something exciting every week. And that's what I do for myself. So it's never boring.
So you're always changing, because I know different trainers see things differently, don't they? So some will say, well, you've got to continue with the same thing, which can get extremely boring, where you're just repeating it and doing that progressive overload. I'm the same as you. And when I do training plans for clients, I like to keep it variable and make it fun, because I think if it isn't fun, you're probably not going to continue with it anyway, right? It's very different if you decide that you've got a goal, like a bodybuilding goal, and you're willing to take the boredom and the pain to get those aesthetics. But if you're doing it because you really want to protect your longevity and just look good in clothes and swimwear, I think that the fun part is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, always make it fun. Listen to music, listen to podcasts while you train. Do
you do a lot of cardio or not? So like, how much do you, in terms of a portion between strength training and cardio?
At the moment, I'm probably doing more cardio than strength training. Well, the gyms are closed right now, but I'll train in my garden, or I'll train at home. But I do cardio every day. So I'll cycle between 12 to 20 kilometers every day.
You mentioned jogging. Do you do jogging as well, or is it
I do
just
jogging.
cycling?
Yeah. It's mainly cycling, but I'll switch it around. If I'm gonna jog, then I'll probably jog about nine kilometers. I wouldn't jog for 20 kilometers. I think I'll be dead. I think my knees will be shot as well.
Yeah.
Can't train legs.
You notice the impact, don't you? I've been doing more recently, and you can notice, I just find as well, like my heart rate is so much higher if I'm out going for a jog compared to a cycle. Like it's so different.
Yeah. You wow. And I guess maybe it's to do with like body weight as well. You know, I'm over 100 kilos and just like bang. I can't.
Yeah, you'd have good joints to that.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
I find it hard enough with my like 53 kilos to lug around.
We're a tiny bit older now, you know, so you just gotta, I think like less impact is good in all fairness. So cycling, I do enjoy that. You got a bike in your house, right? You got a
I've got a watt bike. Do you know what I like about cycling is, in terms of stationary cycling, is it's a little bit like going in the sauna. It gives me a really good sweat. Whereas if you go out for a run in the cold, for example, I'll get warm depending on what I'm wearing, but I won't get that hot. Whereas I find that if you actually want that kind of endorphin release alongside that real sweat, then for me, because I don't sweat easily, then cycling is 100% the way to do it. And you don't even need to go that hard. Like you can do a list style workout, I find, really low intensity for 45 minutes and, you know, watch something interesting and get a really, really good sweat on. I don't know if you find that. I really, that's one thing I enjoy about the watt bike.
I probably, at this time of year, I'm not really sweating that much when I'm out cycling because
no, not when you're outdoor riding.
A couple of degrees. But I normally, when I come back, and I stop, sometimes I'll sweat then because the change of temperature. But I don't know in terms of like calculating the calories, because I know that if I'm wearing my Apple Watch, I don't know if it knows exactly. It's calculating according to my heartbeat. It's calculating according to you know, my weight. But how does it know how much fat I'm burning at that particular time? Because if I'm cycling in the cold, as far as I'm concerned, my body is using a lot more energy.
A lot, yeah, a lot.
You know what I'm saying?
Energy.
So, okay, I might not be sweating as much, but I'm sure I'm burning a lot of calories. You know.
So are you doing that first thing in the morning? Because I've seen some, like sometimes you'll be out, you get up at 5 and do it in the dark.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I generally wake up at 4 or 10 minutes past 4, and then I'll have a hydrogen water, an espresso, and then I'm out there and I'll cycle for about an hour or an hour and a half, depending.
Is it hilly or is it more of a flat ride?
Mostly flat. There's a couple of slight gradients here and there, but it's mainly flat.
So you do that every morning, basically, as soon as you wake up. So it's kind of straight out of bed after coffee. And then will you then come back? Like when's your kind of sauna and kind of hot and cold therapy? Is that daily or?
Sometimes I'll do that straight away. I'll come back, take my clothes off, then in the sauna straight away. So cold, bam, straight away hot.
Yeah, really good contrast.
After that, sometimes I might just do red light therapy immediately afterwards. So it really depends, because obviously I've got my daughter, so I have to think about what I'm going to be doing, what time she wakes up, and spending some time with her. But yeah, sometimes I'll just go straight in the sauna or red light. And then I'll do resistance training a little bit later, like in the afternoon after I've eaten, because I normally do all of this in a fasted state.
So would that be like in the afternoon after lunch that you do your resistance work?
That's right, yeah.
And is that daily or?
Not daily, probably 2 or 3 times a week.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to train really frequently, like 5, 6 times, but now I'm like, I don't really want to. I don't want to. And I think it was a case of just seeing how my body responds. And I'm like, do you know what? It's fine. Like, I'm not losing crazy amount of muscle. And I think it might be down to doing some sauna. It might be having more time to recover, focusing a bit more on having quality sleep as well. And I'm like,
Yeah. So what does that look like for you then in terms of if you're getting up at 10 past 4, what time do you go to bed?
normally about 9, sometimes half 8.
Okay.
But like I normally feel tired around half 7. I'm like, okay, it's kicking in. And then I'll fall asleep normally around half 8, 9 o'clock.
So how old's your daughter?
She's 6. She'll
See,
sleep. She'll sleep before me anyway, so that's
she
fine.
will. Yeah. See, so the difficulty I've got, and this is definitely kind of causing havoc for me, is I've got my eldest is in year 9. So he's just started his GCSE curriculum this year. So he's 13 and a half. And sometimes his homework will take him till gone 10 o'clock at night. And I don't feel like I can go to bed before he's gone to bed. So I find myself staying up, and that is being an early morning person. That's really playing havoc with that's the biggest challenge for me at the moment. So a lot of people find it hard when they've got young children, don't they? And they're waking up early, particularly if you're a bit of a night owl. Whereas for me, that stage was fine because it was like that was just in alignment with what I did. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now with teenagers and the shift, and my next son's 12, he's starting to, particularly in school holidays, doesn't really want to go to bed, will sleep in till 11 o'clock in the morning. It's things are really shifting in the house, and I find that quite difficult because I'm very much like you, up early doing things, and also the morning is the treasured time. Like when we were talking there earlier about managing your mindset, your creativity, or your productivity, the morning routine for me, ever since I read that book The Miracle Morning about 5 years ago, that just changed the way I want to set up my day. So I find that a bit of a challenge. It's kind of trying to get that bedtime back.
It's almost like you need to really hack your sleep to make sure that if it's going to be slightly less, it needs to be high quality.
Yeah, exactly, which is what I've been focusing on so much more. And I'm definitely getting much more consistent with hitting, like even within a shorter window, the right amount of deep sleep, the right amount of REM sleep. I'm keen to see what the lion's mane does with that, just to experiment a little bit. But yeah, so you would intermittently fast would you and compress your eating window down to what, sort of 4 or 6 hours a day?
Yeah, that's right. I think I've done a podcast. Who did I do a podcast with? I think with Dr. James D. Nicolantonio. And I'm not too sure whether, I know he does intermittent fasting. And I remember he mentioned that he just eats in certain periods and he's not really too fussed about the window as such, but kind of keeps it as 2 meals. And I thought, you know what, I think I might just try that then and see how that works. And that sometimes works all right. So I'll eat maybe mid-morning and then again like kind of in the afternoon, which might stretch past the 4-hour window, but I'm just still keeping it as a couple of meals.
Yeah. And what have you found with like female clients? Because I've been kind of diving into this a bit more, and I know there isn't really very much research is there for women because it's so difficult to study women. But some of the studies that are coming out is for premenopausal women. It can actually affect cortisol and affects levels of their sex hormones quite a bit. particularly if they're leaner. So I found, like, for me, because I'm already quite low body fat percentage, I find that I am naturally quite hungry. And that I guess I noticed that my stress levels, just sort of not anxiety, I guess, just tension levels go up if I do longer fasts, and my performance goes down, if that makes sense. So even for me, like doing 16, 17-hour fasts, I find that the sweet spot for me as a woman is probably about 14 hours.
14.
14 hours fasting. So like having a last meal around 6:30, 7, and then not eating until about 10. So yeah, it's kind of 15 hours fast. That's the sweet spot. When I go over that and I'm exercising, I find that just the performance drops off a little bit for me.
I think it really just depends on the person, the individual. If you're really lean, you probably need to either up the calories a bit or maybe increase the window a bit. So that's what
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good point you make there, because you do need to up the calories. And I think that's the challenge for me, because I've got like a hiatus hernia, so I can't eat a very large meal. So that's probably why I would notice it, because actually I would find it very difficult to make up enough calories if I was having 1 or 2 meals a day.
How about smoothies?
Yeah, smoothies work. And also, I find the Bioptimizer's digestive enzymes really help as well. It was fascinating when Wade was explaining about how we just don't produce enough of them, and they really help me as well. But yeah, I find it difficult though to eat, because of that, to eat any large volume, even like big volumes of things like smoothies. So for me, I've found it just works out. 14, 15 hours is about right.
Okay. I think, yeah, I find that smoothies kind of helps me a lot. That might just be my second meal. So I'll just throw a lot of stuff in there, loads of different nuts and fruits and protein, collagen and herbs, and just chuck everything in there. And I'm like, okay, that covers it. And have like one solid meal, one smoothie, and I'm
You've had
okay.
enough.
Yeah, I feel all right. Because like for me to try and get all the minerals and the micronutrients and vitamins, it's kind of difficult if you've only got a couple of meals, in all fairness. So I try and mix and match it on different days to diversify my microbiome, and I'm still working on it.
And will you take like amino acid, if you're in that fasted state, will you take anything like, I know you like Keon products, don't you? Will you take anything like Keon aminos or while you're fasting?
Not when I'm fasting, but I have done, but generally speaking, no. If I feel like, it normally happens if my sleep hasn't been too good. If I want to fast and my sleep wasn't good for whatever reason, I might just have some aminos instead to help me to curb the cravings a bit until my meal time. But generally, I'll just fast and I won't have anything, and I'll have the amino acids before training or while I'm training.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in terms of you then maintaining that body composition, how do you kind of reach enough protein levels?
Through meals, I
Through the
guess.
meals.
It's weird. Like I don't calculate it. I don't sit there and add it up, but I think it must be through the quality of sleep that I have, and through probably the sauna that I use, and the intermittent fast. I know that they all contribute to the growth hormone.
Yeah, they do. They do. And also sauna, like some of the recent studies, isn't it, showing is helping maintain, like even enhance hypertrophy. So it's enhancing muscle gain, and fasting in and of itself is muscle preserving. So I think that whole combination together, and as you say, the sleep, the fasting and the sauna all include increased levels of growth hormone. That together is a really powerful combination.
Yeah. I do want to understand a bit more what's going on there. Like when I look in the mirror, I'm like, how It's insane when I think how much less, because I used to eat quite a lot. I used to eat from around, because I've always woken up early. I'd eat from, man, from about 5 in the morning until maybe 9 in the evening. And I've done that for years. And I guess I was quite big, but still not as lean. But now I'm managing to hold all this muscle, and I'm not really training as much. I'm not eating as much. It's so fascinating to me. It's so
Mm.
fascinating.
Were
So
you bigger then? Were you like overall bigger? Did you have more like higher body fat as well as like high muscle, or how is your body composition different when you were in, because that's a pretty fed state, isn't it? That's basically eating until you go to bed, like
yeah.
no break, and then basically eating, which is really common in people that gain muscle. Like there's a big misconception, isn't there, over I need to go and have like cottage cheese or some casein so it's like slow breakdown overnight, and just all the traditional things that you actually don't need to do.
No, I know people still believe it, and you know what? I'm not even going to argue with them. I'm like, all right, do what you feel is right. When I hear that, I'm like, because I know I used to be that person, making sure it's like, oh, casein, I don't want to go catabolic during the night. And, oh my God, I've done that for so many years. And this walking around with those plastic tubs and throwing it in the microwave. Like, what are you thinking, bro? Microwaving the plastic tub.
Oh my God.
Um, and like a lot of GMO chicken as well. Yeah, I've done that for many years. But yeah, I would have a lot more muscle mass. But yeah, my body fat composition, my body composition was always relatively low anyway.
Mm.
Um,
And do you
but
supplement? Do you take supplements?
what type of supplements?
Yeah, what do you take?
Um, I have some whey protein, but I use Motion Nutrition stuff. Don't know
Oh
if you
yeah.
know Motion Nutrition.
Yeah, no, me some nutrition.
So they've got whey protein, pea protein. So I'll chuck that in my smoothie. Um, and yeah, the digestive enzymes, colostrum, the Keon Flex for the joints. I'll try and do as much as I can for the joints, because at one stage I was feeling pain in my elbows and my shoulder. But then what I realized was that anytime I had anything which was high glycemic, that would be the first place where I'd feel it. I don't know why.
Interesting.
I don't know why, but I'd feel it straight away in the elbows, especially. I'm like, wow, like, why is my elbows hurting? And it took me years to figure that one out.
Isn't that interesting? It's like causing inflammation in the body, basically,
Yeah,
which it does, to be fair.
But not anywhere else noticeable. Maybe the brain slightly, but definitely in the joints. But yeah, what else? Vitamin D3 and vitamin K2 drops. I normally have that. Yeah, there's loads which I take, to be
Do you
honest.
take omega-3?
Sometimes, not
Okay.
always. I do have some. I can't remember what the DHA and EPA measurement was on that. I think they're about, I don't know, about 800 or something like that on the
Yeah.
EPA or something.
That's the one supplement that I can't be without. I notice the biggest transformational difference when I don't take it.
Oh,
Like
really?
in my skin and my hair is the two biggest things that it really, really affects. So I just find that when I take omega-3, I take it quite high dose. So I take Nordic Naturals, and there's about 1,000 milligrams, I guess, in it. So I'm probably taking like 3,000 to 4,000 a day. And that just gives me kind of vibrant, healthy skin. I feel like my cognition's better, and my hair is less dry. It just helps me retain that kind of fluid within the cells. Whereas when I don't take it, it's a bit like not practicing meditation. Within about 4 or 5 days, I'll notice a big difference.
Wow. What about your fish
Yeah.
intake? Do you eat much fish?
I do eat some fish. So we do eat salmon. Like we've got a really, really great fishmonger who kind of visits this farm shop we go to once a week.
Right.
And he's got beautiful fish, and even things like his tuna is mercury tested. Like it's amazing. And the salmon sushi grade, it's like amazing fish. But I don't eat tons of fish. I think that, I don't know, it's funny, isn't it? Because I know some people are real pescatarians, and I was reading how Victoria Beckham's got dangerously high mercury levels at the moment.
Really?
And I think there's always a danger, like because I think if you do eat a lot of like larger fish, that can be an issue. But we are, with two kind of teen or adolescent boys growing up, there's a big focus on steak in our house at the moment. They're just so, oh my God, grass-fed beef and lamb. And they're like, I swear, I think my 12-year-old is pretty much a carnivore. That is
Right.
he never eats, like, he doesn't like really carbs. Occasionally he might have a bit of pasta, but he is such a massive meat eater. And it's funny, isn't it? Because he's a big swimmer as well, and he's just so ripped, like so naturally. So yeah, we probably do eat a bit too much red meat, I'd say, but it's all kind of quality grass fed.
That's cool, man. That's
yeah.
cool. Yeah. Don't know if is there anything else to cover?
I think I asked you most of what I was. I guess the you talked to me about, before you go, you did ask me about how you kind of get yourself to do things that you don't want to do. And I guess, what have you found has been because you're so consistent with what you do, and I think this would really help people. What have you found enables you to bring that consistency? Because I think that's something people definitely, I'm not a big fan of New Year's resolutions at all, but I think people do have a renewed vigor in January, don't they? And I think we almost go through, I don't know if you've noticed it, but even my dogs seem to be doing it, where we've got those dark nights, we've lost a lot of the light, people are almost recovering over Christmas, but then even though we're not in the spring yet, there is a renewed vigor in January. And it's like, how do you make that commitment and then keep it going? I'm always just fascinated by like habits and making sure that they stick.
Having things mapped out throughout the year, I guess. So there's the daily things which I'll always have to do, and then I have to check to see where I'm at. I don't know. I feel like everything has to tie into each other. So if I'm working on one thing, it ties into another, and my fitness is part of my business, and the business is part of my fitness. So if I'm going to talk about fitness, then I need to look fit. I need to. So that that kind of what do you call it? My head is a little bit tired at the moment. You know when you
when it's in alignment, it's kind of become a part of.
When you have to, God, it's like basically, for instance, like my audience or my social media is like accountability. That's it. Having accountability is a very good thing as well. To show people it can be done, and it always keeps me on my toes, even if I might not be bothered. And I don't allow that feeling of can't be bothered to not do it either. It's like I just know it needs to be done. I always think to myself, no one could do it for me. I remember when I was younger, and my uncle used to say to me, Roger, go to the toilet for me. And I was like, how am I supposed to do that? It always stuck in my head. And I just thought,
that's the ultimate in laziness, isn't it?
Yeah,
to the toilet for me. Oh, it's so funny.
And it kind of makes me think that people want to treat themselves that way. They want others to do things for them, and that's one thing which you can't get someone else. You can't delegate that. Other jobs you can, but physically you have to do it yourself. So it's just something that the moment I think I really don't want to do it, I think no one else can do it for me, I have to do it. And tying everything else up with it, just knowing that my health is going to improve. And I don't know, it's so second nature for me. I don't even think about it anymore. I don't think about it. I just get up, I do it. I just have everything lined out. And, I occasionally check my weight and how I'm looking in the mirror. I'll check with certain clothes as well. So I'll wear 34 jeans, and if it starts to feel very tight, then I know I need to up the cardio, for instance. You know, I'll see how certain clothes fit me, and I'll check maybe my cheekbones, that sort of thing.
You check your cheekbones.
Yeah, yeah.
That's hilarious.
Certain pictures, I'm looking, I'm like, okay. I think when the lockdown started last time, like the first lockdown, I did notice I started to put on a bit of weight, and I went up to 106.9 kilos. I still had abs, and that wasn't the point. It was the way the clothes fit me. That was when I noticed things weren't how they should be. And when I looked at certain pictures, if I turned my head to the side, cheeks was filled out a bit more. I was like, right, that doesn't look like how I want to look. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just like, if I feel work needs to be done, then I'll just get on it. I think
that's ultimately, isn't it? It's what Stephen Pressfield talks about. It's the difference between an amateur and a pro, right? Is the work's there, it needs to be done. Let's just get it done. And I think that's the thing. But I think there's also a case of, as you say, accountability is really, really important. And that's where working with a coach can be so, so profound. And also just making that commitment to show up as the best version of you. I think sometimes people are almost afraid of becoming, like, their success is inhibited by the fact that they're afraid of that success. They're almost afraid of becoming that ultimate version. Really interesting when you look at people who sort of yo-yo diet, they get into incredible shape, and then they almost can't wait to get out of it. And it becomes that familiarity feeds the cycle, because actually we always go to what's familiar instead of something new that is a change, and then it's hard to stick with, where it's like, what if you just really committed in 2021 to show up in every sense as the very best version of you, not for anyone else, but because it's the best gift that you could give yourself, right? The gift of great health and just great confidence and feeling how you could. And it doesn't have to be aesthetics, does it? It's just about committing to whatever that goal is and just saying, do you know what? I'm just going to do it anyway. I'm going to do it even when I don't feel like it, because the reward might not come. I think Charles Duhigg talks about this. The reward may not come from the effort itself, because maybe you're never going to feel that great doing that workout. You know, some people don't enjoy it. Maybe you're never going to feel great going for that run. But then how you feel afterwards is the reward. And when that kicks in, I think that drives the behavior change. And if you can stick with it beyond that kind of first few weeks, then the reward mechanism is set up in the brain and you'll continue it. But it's just getting over that hard hurdle first, isn't it?
it is the hurdle, just getting over it. And I think when you do it as well, you feel proud about yourself. And I think the moment you keep failing to show up, I don't know, you start to, you doubt yourself. If you say you're going to do it and you don't, you start losing faith in yourself before anyone else. You start losing faith. So, you know, you start to think, my words, they're weak. They don't mean anything. And if you lose faith in yourself, then you're not going to have faith in anything else. It doesn't matter. So yeah, always showing up for yourself. I think that's really important.
That's so important as well when people hit the snooze alarm, because they forget that they are failing on their commitment in the first thing as soon as they open their eyes. Because the moment you set an alarm, you made a commitment. So if you snooze it, you just failed on your commitment at the beginning of the day. How can you expect your day to go really, really well? And so it's almost like, don't even set it that early if you're not going to be able to get up. Just don't, because then you're not failing. You're not beating up on yourself. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, that commitment, because when you honor your own commitments, your self-esteem and own personal integrity just grows. That's the thing.
Yes, exactly. That is it. You feel proud about yourself. You're like, you know, I told myself I was going to do it. And so you can speak with a lot more conviction when you're speaking to others. Like, yeah, I know what I'm talking about. You know, I don't fail on myself. And that snooze button thing is, you know, there's times when I want to hit the snooze button, but I might just lay in bed for about 30 seconds. And then I'm like, okay, let's get up. And I remember like listening to a book called The 5-Second Rule. And sometimes that pops in my head.
Oh, yeah. It's a brilliant book by
Yeah.
Mel Robbins.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it always comes to me every once in a while, not just waking up in the morning, but sometimes when there's decisions to maybe make a phone call to a company or send an email to an individual. And I'm like, oh, should I do it? Oh, I don't even know what to say. And then, you know, there's loads of things like 5 second rule. Okay, let's get at it. I don't even know what I'm going to say. I'm just going to do it. And, you know, jump first and build your wings on the way down. Like I'll start comprising all these things all together just to get some movement, some momentum. And then it's that action that makes you feel better about yourself. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just about doing it. And then you can sort of build up around it afterwards. And I think when you was talking about being a perfectionist, I think a lot of people fail to even start because they want everything to be perfect. And I think a lot of people are conditioned from school that things should be perfect, or maybe parents or other people around them, like, oh, this needs to be perfect. Oh, I need to do this perfect. And it's just like having a child. You can't find the perfect time. You just go, let's just have the child.
Yeah, let's just do it. There's never going to be a perfect time, is there? Let's face it.
Exactly.
That's true. That's true. And once you gain that momentum, as you say, once something's in motion, it's much harder to stop it. So let's get the right things in motion, because when you get momentum behind the right things, then the projects just take on themselves. So yeah, put momentum behind the right things.
The right things.
Not the sugary foods and the fridge talking to you. Oh, it's been amazing to speak to you today, Roger.
It has been.
It's a pleasure.
Yes. So as we end the year, hopefully 2021 will, I don't know, bring something better for most people.
Yes. One thing I think we can say, is that it has brought a sense of unity, right? That's what I take from this year, is sometimes people go through tough times and other people are going through amazing times in their lives. And I think that the threat of either of becoming ill or someone you know becoming ill has been so close to so many people that I think the real thing that I'm positively taking from 2020 into 2021 is this idea that maybe we're stronger together than ever before, because we are united and people across the world have had to face the same thing. And so maybe in some way, Mother Nature has united us, and may we emerge from this stronger than ever before.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure, Angela.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much, Roger, for coming on again.
All good. Let's find something else to talk about.
Yeah.